Welcome to We Are Libertarians. My name is Chris Spangle. Thank you so much for joining us here. We're also on the Chris Spangle Show. It's confusing. We have two names for the same show sometimes. It's fine. But we are talking about Donald Trump. That's right, the Donald Trump coming to speak at the Libertarian Party convention. The guy who is on another party's ticket is come to speak at the Libertarian Party convention. So Hody Johns is here. Reinhold will be along soon. We're going to talk about it. I'll give my thoughts on what is the point of the convention, what is the point of having a candidate, why Donald Trump, all of it, and give you a little background right after this. All right, welcome back to We Are Libertarians here on the Chris Spangle Show, and we are talking about Donald Trump coming to speak to the Libertarian Party convention. It's very confusing. Many people thought it was a joke. I did too in the beginning, and it apparently is real. Donald Trump is coming to speak at the Saturday night of the convention, and we're going to talk about what is the convention, what is the purpose of it, who's running, all the stuff. We haven't talked about Libertarian Party and Mises and all the national stuff in a very long time, almost years at this point. So Hody Johns is here. Hody, thank you so much for being with me.
Chris, you're a great dude. You've been avoiding all the good stuff. I'm sorry that you've fallen. This is the temptation. I'm sorry you gave into the dark chocolate.
I know. I have avoided talking about the National Libertarian Party for a very long time, mostly because I just don't think it really matters all that much. I mean, it matters to people who are in the party, but I think in the broad spectrum of the world, like the Libertarian Party is a great social club. It's a time in my life I hold very dear. It's how I met so many awesome friends, influenced some individuals to become more libertarian through it. But I don't really necessarily think that the Libertarian Party on a national scale is all that is in a bag of chips, I think, as you say in Utah. I'm just not direct political action just isn't my thing as much, Hody. So there hasn't been much of a point to talk about it because why? I know you're like going on all kinds of different shows talking about it, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've fully flipped from politics to culture as a focus. I think politics is like taking a temperature, and if you already know the patient's sick, then kind of taking the temperature is like, yeah, like if you have sick people, they're going to give you sick candidates. This is how we get Donald Trump. This is how we get Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And so honestly, I just find the whole arguing about politics a little bit reductive when like we're not going to get better choices until we fix the culture, and that is, to me, that's the most important focus.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you totally. I think the whole point is focusing on your circle of people, that the people that are going to be at your funeral, your neighbors, the people in your immediate community, and not worrying about whether Donald Trump or Joe Biden's going to be president, because yeah, it does matter, right? Like look at Donald Trump's decisions during COVID and how much they've affected the last 4 or 5 years of our life. So it does matter who is president. Look at Joe Biden's decisions with Ukraine and Israel. But in terms of your sphere of focus and my sphere of focus, like going out and running for office to me just seems like an exhausting waste of time.
I issue the challenge consistently to say, take that money, go work on a campaign. Absolutely do it. Spend your money and spend your time on a campaign, and then take the same of time and money and just volunteer at a like whatever local shelter, whatever food kitchen, whatever it is. And you tell me afterwards which one made a bigger impact. You can even say politically, which one made a bigger impact on people's politics and people's outlooks and the way they vote. And I just, there is no way to me that you can make that you can rationalize that expenditure of time. It's just so much better and well spent if you give it directly to your community. Something I learned from you, Chris, is that the people who matter are going to be the ones that show up to your funeral, and everybody else you can kind of stick to the side. It's not that these things don't matter. They're kind of right when they say every election is now the most important one of our lifetime. It's just too important to be wasting on the likes of Joe Biden and Donald Trump.
Yeah. So Skalja asks if you're going to be at the Libertarian Party convention.
I will not. I have left the Libertarian Party. I understand the argument that it's like I could fix it, and I may come back. I'm open to that if it gets fixed. But me personally, and I think that this is something every person has to decide for themselves, I'm just not a very great political creature. I worked on a few campaigns, very few that were like really successful. I mean, Ashley Shea got elected, but I believe she is now, especially with the Libertarian Party recently, but she flipped over to the Democratic Party, but she did get elected as a Libertarian. That's kind of like it. I mean, I worked on Larry Sharp's campaign, and I love Larry. I still do, but that was unfortunate how that turned out. And like, it's just I don't know. I had a lot of other losses as well that I'm not too proud of. And I think it's like, do I want to take 20 hours and bury it? Or do I want to take 20 hours and make 100 people's lives better? And it like, to me, there's just no balance there. I'm just not great with it. I used to work for the GOP. I was a strategist in Colorado for a while. When you have all the cards in your deck, we'd be having a different conversation. But and I might argue for politics if I was a Republican strategist. Obviously, when you have the upper hand, you use that power as much as you can. But
Skalja says, I'll be fighting to fix it for you, but dang, it'd be easier if I was fighting with more allies. And yeah, that's true, but I don't know. I don't want to deal with all you nerds.
It's not fun.
Let's bring in I knew Hody was a Republican, likes his smoked meats too much, Andrew says. Andrew also says, where is Dennis? We don't know who Dennis is, but Reinhold is here. So let's actually, that's way too close for comfort. So we'll zoom out a little bit here. We're live streaming this. Thank you so much, and you're more than welcome to leave a comment and ask a question and weigh in. I guess we should start, kind of go back, because I think I've had people write in and say, hey, can you do a show on the Mises Caucus? You talk about it occasionally, but I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on in the Libertarian Party. I'm not the right guy to have that conversation anymore. I did in 2018 talk a lot about it. And I was one of the first people who said, these guys are trouble, not because they have the wrong beliefs, but just because they have seemingly no interest in trying to understand the party as a whole, and they're going to come and change it from the inside. And here's what I'll say. It's Chesterton's fence. If you know what Chesterton's fence, G.K. Chesterton used this illustration, and two people walk up to a fence, and one person looks at it and says, this is an ugly fence. Let's tear this fence out. And the other person says, well, let's wait a minute. Let's take a step back, because this fence here serves some purpose and some previous generation put it here. So let's determine what the fence is for before we go and make a lot of changes, right? And that's how I've always viewed the Mises Caucus, is they wanted to come in, push out the institutional knowledge, do everything their way, were prideful in thinking that it would work, because they never really wanted to look at the fence and the operations of the Libertarian Party and how things functioned, and then change it and figure out what was going on. It's very progressive in my view, right? We're just going to come in. We're so good at this, even though we've never achieved anything in politics or run campaigns or worked on anything. We're just going to change it, and it's going to be better because of bold messaging. And that seems to have hit a fence. So you guys tell me what the state of the Libertarian Party is 2 years into. Angela McArdle is the chair. She is a Mises person. They successfully took over the Libertarian Party. There's here's what I know, right? Like, this is the basics, okay, of what I see on Twitter. The party is mostly broke. A third of the membership has left. Ballad access in 46 states as opposed to 50. They don't have a candidate that inspires even them. Obviously, Rechtenwald seems to be their choice. Mark Rutherford is running for chair against Angela McArdle, and Chase Oliver could be the nominee. Mark Rutherford could be the chair. There's no overwhelming tied coming into this. The delegate counts are 50-50. It's sort of a toss up. So you'd think, and then on top of that, you've got all kinds of mistakes, right? So I think you can look at New Hampshire and you can look at Jeremy Kauffman, right? One individual who has one Twitter account, and you can go, that doesn't necessarily mean that an entire group of people or an entire caucus are bad at messaging or whatever, right? I do think when you look at a convention and you invite Donald Trump to it, that's like a group decision. So I think this feels like a much bigger conversation, which is why I'm willing to engage in it. But, Hody, Reinhold, you guys follow this a lot more granularly. Did I get those facts right? Like, where is the Libertarian Party at in 2024 going into its convention in a presidential year? Reinhold, go ahead.
Well, yeah, the way I look at it is that's everything is down as far as funding is down, membership is down, interest in the party is down, interest in what's being done is down, and it's a lot of the things that you talked about. But I think also at the very heart of what the problem was or is that when they wanted things to change the way they were being run, so they had an opposition to that. So they decided that they were going to politically take over the party, and their method of doing that wasn't to come in and say, let's do a great job here, get everybody on our side and win in the marketplace of ideas, and just say our ideas are better, our plans are better, everybody will come to them then and we will be fine. They decided to come in with an idea of division, to say those people over there are bad, we need them out of the party. Those people over there are bad, we need them not to have any power anymore. We need all these other people not to have power, and you should give it to us instead, which is a quicker and easier way to gain control of power. The problem is it doesn't give you an increase in your pace. It doesn't give you an increase in your power. It just takes you and puts you in a bigger, higher level in a smaller pond. So what we did is we took the small pond that we had as a party, as a movement that was growing and getting bigger with Johnson and everything, and then they decided just to kind of take all the water away, and now they wanted a small little pond to be in power for. And when you do that, you don't inspire people. You get people upset. You push them off. You tell them they're not needed, they're not wanted, and then when they go away, you act shocked, like, where did everybody go? Why isn't anybody joining in with us and helping us do what we need to do? We have the same goals. And it's like, well, we might have actually had the same goals at one point, but it seemed to me their goal is more about getting rid of the people they don't like, as opposed to trying to achieve something with people of a like mind. And I think that was where it really fell down at. And that's why they're having so many troubles and struggles right now, was not able to reconvince people to come back, that they completely just tore apart, not just politically, but, in very mean-spirited tactics. So people are just willing to give them the chance to do anything.
Hody?
Yeah, boy, summarizing it is difficult because, like you said, Chris, this tends to be granular. I think of like individual instances. To be as general as I can, we took a backslide after Johnson and Weld when we went from 5% to 1.8%. On the next one, that was a shame. Obviously,
I think everybody agrees that Joe Jorgenson, Gary Johnson, wasn't the most inspiring, but he got the job done, right, and gave ballot access to a lot of candidates. Mm-hmm. And Joe Jorgenson just didn't seem to inspire anybody.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because now you look at Rechtenwald, who has the inspirational assets of an old shoe that you keep in your closet.
I did see him. I did see this 50-year-old man rapping on Tim Pool, dressed in I don't know, a scarf or a beanie or something. So really not embarrassing at all. Not James Weeks, but of a different variety. It's okay.
Yeah, and I'll give it to the LPMC, I guess, because I was very sympathetic. Chris, you warned me about them, and while I was still endorsing Joshua Smith and LPMC candidates.
Well, my thing is I being executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana from 2008 to 2012, I saw I dealt with a lot of Ron Paul Republicans telling us we were wasting our time. They were all very awful, to be honest with you. And it never made sense to me because I was a Ron Paul libertarian. So it was let's work together. So when the Mises Caucus actually came in 2018, was like, this is great. Okay. I even had some contact with Michael Heist, and I think that was the mistake. Because in that convention, he kept claiming that Sam Goldstein, my former boss, and the other chair, Daniel Hayes, who is nutty, had disinvited Ron Paul. And Sam was never a great Ron Paul lover, if you knew Sam, but he's not an unfair person. And he's like, that never happened. They came in too late. It was incompetence. They came in too late trying to get this space. They couldn't get the space in the convention. And now they're claiming, they're just lying about it, saying that we aren't allowing them to come in. And if you go back and listen to my interview somewhere in the archives with Daniel Hayes, I even say in the episode, like, Michael Heist and I had a conversation. He couldn't come because he's going to his brother's baseball game. And, I posted something about how he lied. I mean, because he was lying about it. And man, that was like, for years in their Facebook group and everybody, it was just go crap on Wall, go crap on this brand. And it really did hurt the brand overall as the party kind of moved populist right. But it was very clear that they were bringing Trumpian tactics to the party, and that they weren't willing to work with anybody. They just wanted to win in whatever way. And it didn't really matter how they won, as long as they won. And you won. And I kind of agree with Justin O'Donnell, who was former Mises guy, who's now kind of anti-Mises, who on Twitter said, if Angela McArdle did work for the Trump campaign and was running the party that way, like, could you point out where she's done a good job? Like, she's done a good job in trying to destroy the party. Like, I just think that they have done an overall very poor job. Like, yeah, Dave Smith goes on Joe Rogan and has brought a lot of people on Twitter to awareness to the party. But I don't see a lot of people around me excited about the libertarian term anymore. It's a lot different than where it was 6 or 7 years ago, where people kind of waking up to the term, excited about the term. Now it just feels like we're so much further into the term libertarian being associated with bigotry, with racism, with kind of right-wing populism. And I just don't think this Trump thing helps that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I spoke with two members of the Mis Caucus on a Real Libertarian show with Jeremy Harding. Long-form conversations, really deep, really interesting. And they were talking about those lies, Chris, that they told about the Wall Network, because the idea is they had to strike first. And it was interesting to hear it from like insiders.
No, I was the first person and the biggest podcast to talk shit about them.
Well, right. But like this happened. I mean, they struck with the lies first, like when we had people that were endorsing their candidates and stuff. And I was like, that seemed to you to come out of nowhere. Like, what's the lies going on? You call out the lies. Why did this start? And it all started because they were like, we're going to push candidates that focus only on economics. So even though We're Libertarians cares also about economics a lot, I do, you do. I mean, we talk about it. It also cares about social liberties. And the idea is if they put a candidate forward that's bad on social liberties and good on economics, well, you're always going to choose your candidate that's good on economics and good on social liberties. And so therefore they can't make that crossover. Knowing that, they decided to go on the offense and, tell lies, get you out, do those kind of populist Trumpian tactics that you were noting. And that's why, because it struck us all. I remember we were all like looking at each other like, what is happening here?
What's the point of like, I'm in a third party.
Why start a war?
I'm in a third party because I want honesty. Like, I left the Republican. Right. I could stay if I wanted to deal with BS and lies. Like, I just stay in the Republican Party and keep that automatic 45%, especially in a red state. But here's what I would also say. I want to, this scientific libertarian comment says the Mises Caucus has some of the best activists and all of the worst ones. I would not even say all of the worst ones. There's some pretty bad across the board. I have found that there are a lot of regular rank and file Mises guys that have listened to the show, that I've talked to over the years, that I really like, that don't really fit in with sort of the chicanery that goes on at maybe the top of the organization and the people who are running the party now. And it's not like you can't. I think a lot of times the critics of the caucus lump everybody into they like make it sing like one group, right? It's sort of the way that
Org.
it's like the way that, you know, Candace Owens talks about the left, as if there's one left. Like, that's just not how it works in any movement. So I would say, like, I'm not criticizing everybody in the Mises Caucus, but I don't like Michael Heist. He lied about me. He was dishonest. And he doesn't like me either. So I don't really care, right? I don't know Angela McArdle from Adam. I was on Dave Smith's show. I didn't think much of him. I felt that he was very unfair. And in the way that he handled the appearance, and he continues to misrepresent how that all went. But, you know, that's my only issue with him. Yeah, so I think that the way that they've run it has been very poor. I think Reinhold, let's jump into the Trump thing, right? There's Hody, there's like probably stuff you've done. If people are more interested in like the overall Mises thing, they can go listen somewhere. What was the show you were on? What are some of the shows that other people are doing? Like, where would you say? I know Project Liberal and Joshua Eagle and Fakertarians, they're kind of the opposite of Mises, right? Jacob Wingerad, I think, is always pretty fair in the pro Mises side, right? If people want to actually follow that stuff, give us like a guide to following it.
Boy, I talk about it on Real Libertarians with Jeremy Harding. It's a new show. I think we're up to 8 episodes. I am a guest. It is his show, but I'm a regular guest there. And yeah, just kind of following along, kind of finger on the pulse, what happened this week, what's going on, sort of thing. As far as history, I mean, unfortunately, as good as it gets is going to be Fakertarians. I have issues with some of them as well, and there's another cultural issue there. But as far as like exposure of, if you're specifically looking for like Mises Caucus issues, it's about as good as you're going to get. You'll get it shared there. And yeah, that's probably where I'd recommend finding it.
I want to share this thread that Josh Eagle put together, who's I don't even know what he does. I think he's attached to students.
Project Liberal. He doesn't call himself a libertarian anymore.
Students for okay.
Yeah.
Stop calling yourself a libertarian. Don't do that. They're the ones who suck. Don't change your name. Call yourself a libertarian and be a good libertarian. I go on all the stuff that I'm on and I talk about being a libertarian, even though I know if somebody goes and investigates libertarian from the largely progressive and black audience of the Pat Down, they're probably not going to find a lot of great stuff from people who call themselves libertarian. But the thing about those libertarians, the populist right-wing people, none of them are going to be libertarians in a year and a half. They're all going to go vote for Donald Trump. They're all, when he wins, they will all go join the Republican Party. Like, quit abandoning the label and doing these dramatic comments on Twitter and I'm a classical liberal. Just call yourself a libertarian, own it, and continue to show that there are people who identify that way as decent people. So none of these people are going to be around in 2 years. And then who's going to keep the term? Who's going to continue on the fight for the word libertarian? Nobody.
The problem is what does that word mean and what's the perception of that word? Because like for 30 years I've been involved and there's always been this kind of right-wing populist side of the party, of the movement, that's been pulling at it and trying to change what that perception means. And then we come back as a group and we try to beat it back, be good libertarians. We fight against it. And then if 10 years later, the fight comes back again, and then it comes back again. And then the perception in the public's mind is because they're always hearing about the newsletters and other groups that have kind of been involved with the party over the years. When at a time in the 90s, early 90s, it was the libertarians who were kind of playing with reaching out to the right-wing movement and bringing them in. And that association has kind of been there off and on for a long time. And it just feels like we fight against it so hard. Eventually we kind of start making inroads and we're getting popular again. And we're getting to where people are saying, okay, well, maybe they're not just, crazy Republicans. And then you have the Tea Party, and that comes back in. And then now we're having Trump things come back in, and we're fighting against that. And the worst thing we could do is to make such a big public show of supporting that exact thing, which I think we've done now with this going out and inviting Donald Trump to come in. And what's funny is you said something about it being a kind of a group thing. You know, a lot of people had to get together to make that decision. It was one person's decision. Anything like that is supposed to go against even the full LNC and be voted on, and it wasn't. Now they probably would have voted for it because, you know, of the makeup of the group right now, but that didn't even happen. It was just a behind the scenes thing between one person talking to a couple other people. They made the whole thing and exposed out there, and are trying to figure out why everybody's upset.
All right, hold on that thought. All right, because we'll start in how this developed in just a second. But I want to direct people to go look at Eagle's thread, who's connected to Students for Liberty, Project Liberal. This was May 1st. Today, Mis Caucus leaders of the Libertarian Party announced Donald Trump as the headliner for the LP convention. The MAGA infiltrate and destroy op of the Libertarian Party is officially complete. I get to say, I told you so. Then he goes through why he thinks that the Mises Caucus project was an infiltration by the Trump movement to help him in 2024. If you look at individual states like Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, they were within the margin of error. Kind of goes on to talk about the launch, which was really quick, systematically, very organized, right? They were founded, the LPMC was founded 3 days after a 2017 white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. According to the former LNC chair, the decision to start the LPMC was motivated by grievances that Mises Caucus founder Michael Heist had with Nick Sarwark. And he's got all kinds of documentation in these things. They didn't like that Nick said that they condemn bigotry as irrational and repugnant. Hello, dear. I'm podcasting. What can I help you with? Pizza's here? Okay, I'll be down as soon as possible. Little Caesars is here, so we got to speed this up. Hey, Squish, come shut the door, please. So they go on to kind of talk about Steve Byrne, who I met in 2018 at PorkFest. He was the former CEO of Overstock.com, big MAGA guy. He ended up being a big funder of the Mises movement, election denier. Immediately after Trump's loss in 2020, Mises Caucus revenue exploded, increasing by over 500% in a short time. With no existing caucus able to compete with this funding, their new revenue fueled the takeover of state affiliates across the country one by one. The money was used to pay people to attend conventions, including rooms, flights, and other accommodations. Some of these expenses were reported to the public, and some never showed up on an FEC report, leaving questions about who's actually funding the effort. And they kind of go on to show, he just goes on this like long thread that I'm not going to get into, all of it, showing some of these stats. And I guess, so I tried to find the data for this, and I will continue to look for the data. I just didn't have time to put it together today. But I was talking to someone yesterday. Yes, Little Caesars, are things really that bad, Spangle? Do we need to plug the Patreon? Things are actually that bad, yes. So the Patreon's way down, obviously. We love all of our patrons, and yeah, I get it. It's my fault. But we're at Little Caesars level right now. But I guess if you overlay, Reinhold, the FEC report of the Mises Institute on a timeline, and you put it to the timeline when Steve Bannon is in prison, it's up, and then he goes to prison, and it goes down, and then when he gets out of prison, it goes up with a bunch of little $100 contributors. So I need to look into that more. But I was talking to somebody yesterday who I trust a lot, and they were like, no, it's absolutely true when you actually look at it and you put that together. They just couldn't get it to me in time. But if you're really nerdy about this stuff, you can go check it out. So do you think that this was a Republican plot from the beginning, a MAGA plot to fuel the Mises Caucus to come in and screw up these state affiliates, screw up the fundraising of the party, handicap the next candidate in 2024. What are your feelings about that? I mean, what have you heard, Reinhold?
On my side of things, I don't think it's as direct as that initially. I think it's kind of more like what happened with the Tea Party movement. The Libertarians were out there doing these protests every April 15th, for tax day, and they were doing them for several years. Obama gets elected, and then the Republican kind of machine groups saw that this event was going on, and they were upset about losing, so they decided to jump onto that event, and they pushed a bunch of money into it. They put a bunch of people into it. It got it pumped up, and here we now have this movement that's starting to kind of swell and take a little bit of effort going on. And then they started saying, well, those libertarians over there are kind of making us look bad. Let's get rid of them. Right. And it's kind of the same movement where it's like Michael Heist had a thing where he was upset about something specifically. He had other people who were upset. He got them together. He started this thing, and he used very specific language and very specific tactics to kind of get the ball rolling. But once the ball got rolling, there's an opportunity that other people will see there to do something with it and kind of use it for their purpose. And I think that's where between their nefarious efforts and Michael Heist not identifying or caring about identifying them coming in, kind of like when there's a lot of accusations about Trump and Russia, and it's much more different than that. It's not like Russia was saying, here, go do this, and here's Trump, and we're going to get him in power, and that's how we're going to do it. It's more like Trump would say, I need help, and I'll take it from anywhere. These guys are willing to help me. Let's go and use them. Right. And then that's kind of how Michael Heist is working, is that he's taking help where he can get it. And there's all these people who's like-minded to him telling him, here, we can give you money. We can give you people. We can help you get this thing going. So he did it.
Yeah. And I think you kind of see that I think you see that in the Trump thing, where it's like, we're going to invite him to our convention. We're going to troll him. We're going to have him have the first time anyone's ever actually stood up to him. We're going to make him answer our questions. Like, it's you're either very naive or you're so prideful that you think that you have that ability to dominate somebody who really sees them as he views himself as an authoritarian figure at this point. I'm not saying he's an authoritarian. You have to have a lot of infrastructure behind you, but he definitely doesn't look at Michael Heist and Angela McArdle and get scared.
Right. And the thing about that too, that I find interesting, is that Angela Heist will sit and say to the press, we want Biden to lose. We're willing to do what we can, join forces with Trump and make sure Biden loses. And then they tell us, oh, we're going to really just hammer away at Trump and make him look bad and take him down. You can't have both of those things.
Where did she say the first thing?
In the initial article, that there was a news article that came out the day she said it, where she specifically says that the Republicans and us have the same goal of making sure Biden doesn't get reelected, because Biden is worse and Trump shares a lot of our beliefs. Right. So she makes that statement to the press.
Is that not true?
Well, I think depends on who you mean by us. I mean, the right-wing populists and Trump have a lot more in common than maybe standard libertarians or left libertarians would have with Trump. Right. So I think there's a lot of just straight up libertarians who find Trump and Biden pretty much the same thing, or, a little half dozen one, half dozen the other. There's no real clear winner.
Didn't the day that he announced this go on Time magazine and say he basically wanted a military dictatorship? Like, I look at it and you go, okay, well, do we have a lot of common with Donald Trump? Well, he risked war with Iran by killing Soleimani. He added $8 trillion to the debt. He empowered Fauci to take over the entire pandemic response, which shut down the entire country. All of that happened under a CDC and an FDA that he appointed. He passed 2 stimulus bills and wrote the third that Biden passed. And on that third one was mad at Nancy Pelosi because it wasn't big enough, which is the cause of our inflation. Yes, Joe Biden has not done enough to curb it and added more spending with things like the infrastructure bill, but the shutdown and the inflation and the stimulus are the reason we have inflation. That's Donald Trump. We don't have anything in common with Donald Trump. We don't have anything in common with a person who has no concept of the rule of law, who will lie about election results to stay in the presidency, who is willing to use violence to stay in the presidency. And I know that you all have these beliefs about Jan 6 because you've just been propagandized about it, but you're a fucking idiot. Like January 6th, go back. Everybody knew that day was wrong. Everybody knew it was messed up. But somehow we have all forgotten about how we actually viewed what took place that day and are giving him the benefit of the doubt again. I don't know why this guy gets the benefit of the doubt when he's had 4,000 lawsuits filed against him. I mean, how many lawsuits do you guys have filed against you? That's just a fundamentally dishonest person who has 4,000 lawsuits filed against them. Even billionaires like Jeff Bezos haven't had that many lawsuits filed against them. Anyways, I couldn't think less of Donald Trump as a human being, as a politician. And we've seen his track record as president. He wasn't a libertarian. He's not a libertarian. And there are things where we share some values. Like he is more anti-war than Joe Biden for sure. That's a good thing. There are good things about Donald Trump's presidency, but he wasn't libertarian. He's not a libertarian, and he's not an improvement. He was president. We did see how bad he was, right?
Yeah, he did more for taking away gun rights than Biden has done since.
I know, right? So yeah, I mean, if you are a conservative leaning person, then you look at the Supreme Court appointments. I look at those and I go, well, that was a good thing. That's way better than what Joe Biden would have done. Right. So I don't know. Anyways, so Hody, I forget what my question to him was. Going back to the takeover as some sort of secret Republican plot, do you buy that at all?
So I used to think yes for a while, because I think the convincing argument is if it wasn't to take over, what would be different about it? And it just is misstep after misstep, misfire after misfire. After talking with the insiders at the LPMC, the conversation that I had, I am friends with Jacob. I see it now as more of a bad trades. They traded We're Libertarians for Republicans for a day. Right. Or Republicans who go libertarian for a day, in an explicit strategy. They wanted Republicans to vote out the left leaning libertarians and then go back to joining the Republican Party. They sold it to them that way.
Yeah. But how many, in 2018, when Joshua Smith at the convention was railing against the socialist libertarians, there were literally 18 of them.
Left libertarians are so small.
They created an enemy, and I never had met a left libertarian except for James Neese. He was the one.
Yeah.
And all the years that I was a libertarian, it's all of a sudden them having a foil grew that movement.
Yeah.
And so it was you can blame them for the rise of this whole left libertarian movement.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to validate some of it. I think the reason, and one of the things that I hate about this markup by Eagle, Eagle, I have respect for him as a person. I actually am glad he stopped. I know what you said earlier, Chris, keep calling yourself a libertarian. He actually is legitimately kind of abandoned libertarian philosophy. So in his case,
Joshua
it makes
Eagle
sense
has?
for him. Yeah, he's pro nuke and pro Israel occupation. Okay. And and it depends on how purity test you want to get with it. Obviously, libertarians 4 years ago, that would have been yeah, a lot of libertarians are kind of pro nuke, but they've generally tend to leave, and he's big on still believes in democracy and government, and just do it right kind of thing. So, but I just want to say this, that Sarwark did say the LPMC, 3 days, it was founded officially 3 days after Charlottesville. Obviously the LPMC was in place before then. It was not explicitly to have racists. Otherwise, you get people like Archie Flower, John Hudak on there. They are some of the most anti-LPMC people now. It would not have been sold to them if they were hey guys, y'all love them riots for the racists, right?
Oh, you're saying people who are anti-LPMC now, like Hudak, were Mises people before,
correct,
and then defected.
Right.
All right, gotcha.
The idea that Sarwark painted this as like, oh, these were the Charlottesville riots people. So like, I think for me, the issue is that Sarwark was a problem. Chris, you're talking about the lockdowns. Sarwark, I mean, I have hyped this up everywhere I could, but just constantly would be like, how did the government grow under COVID? And then like when you give him a response, if it was like at all based in reality, would just ghost you and keep asking and keep asking, keep asking. He was absolutely a denier that government grew at all under the pandemic. That there were any issues.
I'm not saying that Sarwark.
Oh, I know you're not saying.
And I think this is an important point in defense of Mises people. They look at it and they go, look, how can you look at Bill Weld and Nick Sarwark and the performance of the messaging through COVID specifically, but before that, and not like as a more right-leaning, right populist libertarian, not have a problem with a lot of what was done and said. And that's why things had to be recalibrated. You had to you had to have this, the takeover was inevitable by libertarians who are more conservative leaning, because the party had become too close to DC. It had become too close to trying to be friendly with the Beltway. They saw their job as influencing Washington, DC, which made them get swamp on them, which made them abandon the principle of libertarianism. I can see a lot of that. Like when you look at Bill Weld, like I was a big Gary Johnson guy. I make absolutely no apology for it. His campaign got ballot access for 8 states, which led to a lot of elected libertarians. He was the right guy at the right time. And if you were a delegate at those conventions, you wouldn't have made a different choice. But you weren't a delegate at those conventions, so you didn't, because you just want to criticize and not get involved, right? So then they get involved, and now, look, you're not doing very well. But when you look at, like, Joe, for instance, and how feckless a lot of her messaging was during 2020, it didn't inspire anybody. Left libertarians, right libertarians, middle libertarians, like, of course there's going to be a reckoning when you're in a moment that is inherently authoritarian, and the Libertarian Party is trying not to upset the mainstream media. It's not trying to upset the Beltway. You look at it and you go, okay, I could see why this was very attractive to a lot of rank and file people.
We had one big moment when I worked for the Joe Jorgenson campaign where our like numbers went way up. And it's the moment that unfortunately the LPMC hated, but when she said we have to be actively anti-racist. And that was easily like just, and I'm telling you from behind the scenes, I think I even shared, I was allowed to leak some of the information, and our interactions went up, supporters went up, money went up, like skyrocketed. And other than that was so mellow. And I think unfortunately, because of the reaction to the populist libertarians, Joe Jorgenson decided to abandon that messaging despite the money and the engagements and the support from that. And it was just like, boy, that's really unfortunate that you went pragmatic at the worst possible time. Like, you know, that people loved that radical message, and then you went pragmatic and wussed out on it. The same thing that we see from, you called it this one too, Chris, the LPMC went hardcore prag.
Once
Trump
you
thing
get in,
is just another.
Once you're in charge, you want to succeed, and there is no other way to operate a bureaucracy than to cut deals and to do things that, like, can best be described as pragmatic, right? Like it's inevitable. All right, so let's talk about Donald Trump and inviting him to the convention and finish this last 20 minutes. Now that we've kind of, I know it took a long time to set the table, but a lot of my audience doesn't follow this stuff, and I didn't want to just jump right in the weeds. They need to understand how we got to this place, right? So the people who are running for president right now are Lars Mapstead, Mike Termott, Chase Oliver, Michael Rechtenwald, Jacob Hornberger, and there's probably some other people, but if, you know, I'm normie adjacent, 1 foot in normie world, 1 foot in libertarian world. So like, those are the ones that I know. So that I'll call them the front runners. And the Libertarian Party has a convention. All right. They have a convention like the others, but we're not on primary ballots as a party. Okay. So if you want to become president In the Libertarian Party, you need to go to all the state conventions and you speak to the state conventions, you gather delegates, then you go to the Libertarian Party convention, usually held in May, unfortunately during race weekend, on Memorial Day weekend in May, which is why I'm not going, because I care more about the race than I do the future of the country. And the delegates at the convention then select the nominee, who is then placed on ballots that have gained access. Republicans and Democrats have given themselves ballot access in all 50 states, right? They have to do things, but they have a lot of infrastructure and a lot of money. So ballot access is pretty much automatic in most places. For third parties, though, you have ballot access requirements that are different in all 50 states. So for Indiana, we every 4 years get 2% in the Secretary of State's race in the Libertarian Party, and they get ballot access for 4 years. If you're in Ohio, it's virtually impossible now because the state legislature keeps changing those ballot access requirements. In Pennsylvania, it's based on the governor's race, right? Or the presidential race, I believe, or the governor's race. I don't know. I'm not going to guess your ballot access laws, but some places it's petitioning. You have to get a certain amount of signatures in each congressional district to get on the ballot. In some places, it's 2% in the governor's race or the presidential race. So there's a lot of different laws, and the main purpose of the Libertarian Party in the existence of its 50 years has mainly been to get ballot access for its candidates, specifically the presidential candidate. The presidential candidate is the main marketing race of the Libertarian Party. That is when the libertarian message really gets to your average person. It's the one time in all the years that I was a Libertarian Party person where my friends and family would ask me about it. People want to know who you're running and what they stand for, which was always the argument for like Gary Johnson, who was palatable to your average person, your friends and family, which is why in 2016 he was able to get a lot of votes, because people looked at him, a former governor, and said he's responsible, right? Jo Jorgensen in 2020 didn't get as many because when people looked at her, they didn't feel she was ready for prime time. Not even a lot of libertarians. So the convention works on delegates. Not anybody can walk in. You have to be selected at your state convention and by your state party to go and participate as a delegate in the national convention. In this particular case, there's Friday with a bunch of training, Saturday, a bunch of training and speeches and debates amongst all the different candidates. The convention is a huge fundraiser. It is a place where a presidential campaign raises the most money, gets the most media attention, and sets the table by networking. Because everybody's in one place, it's where the campaign can then go to states and say, what resources can I give you? Can you give me? Let's figure out a way to work together. On Sunday, there are elections for chair, for presidential race, for vice presidential race. And on Saturday night now, Donald Trump is coming to speak. The Libertarian Party presidential candidate doesn't have a speaking slot. Okay. They get selected on Sunday and then everybody goes home, and there's never a moment where they get to have a speaking slot. There is the idea that Donald Trump will come and speak, and then afterwards, the winner of a straw poll of the delegates will then give a rebuttal. This is kind of seen as an opportunity for the Mises candidate, Michael Rechtenwald, who's the presumptive favorite, to get some time on C-SPAN to kind of give a rebuttal, so it helps him the next day in the election of all the candidates. So, of course, naturally, all the different delegations that support all the different candidates are really upset with that idea. The development of this, Washington, D.C. was selected a long time ago. That has nothing to do with it. I think let's talk briefly about RFK. There apparently has no, I mean, he's still on the table, by the way. RFK Jr. could still come and speak to the party, maybe possibly still run for the nomination. But I think the whole seeking after Robert Kennedy Jr. as the nominee by the chair, Angela McArdle, has to factor into this somehow. So can one of you give us like a brief background on that whole affair? And I'm going to run downstairs and eat a piece of pizza. So you two talk about that for like
Okay.
2 minutes.
Well, I don't know. I don't even know whose idea it was originally, but I think it was just kind of a thought that, hey, we need ballot access. This guy's getting a lot of pull. Let's see if we can use onto that. So it was kind of like both sides looking at each other saying, politically, we could join our powers, like join your rings together, and the monster gets bigger. They weren't looking at what does he stand for, everything else. The only thing they saw was, oh, he's anti COVID vaccinations. Cool. He's probably our guy. Let's go join him. Let's do this. And it was just, I think, a way to try to gin up attention and to try and make a splash as best they can so that they can get more people into the movement and get more people into giving them money. And that's where, because they know that they're failing in that area. But I don't think it was, I don't know how big of a plot behind the scenes it was to do. I think this is more a case of they're getting more of a splash now, I think, that they want to have, even though it's going to be bad for the movement and party overall. They think it's going to be a positive, so they're going to focus more on this aspect now, and they've kind of pushed RFK Jr. away, as it were. It's kind of like a bad thought. We'll get back to that later if we need to, type thing.
Yeah, Ballad Access sucks. It's a tough thing. It is the most obvious thing you can point to people about how rigged the system is, because it's very, like, a mainstream person would be like, well, that's completely unreasonable. And how these, in addition to what Chris was talking about, I'll throw New York in the mix as far as states that just make it more and more impossible for libertarians to compete. Being on the ballot in all 50 states, even a couple times in a row, was a monumental achievement. It requires state by state focus. It's because they all have different guidelines, and these guidelines involve jumping through hoops, and sometimes it's collecting signatures, which may sound the easiest, but that's among the hardest. Getting ballot access is they will challenge your signatures in court. When I worked with the GOP, we even challenged our own guys' signatures if we didn't like them, and basically had judges in our pockets that we knew would sign off on it, would win it for us, because we'd say we want these candidates and not these candidates. Completely decimated the small government Tea Party folks by taking all their candidates and just being like, oh, they're higher in the polls, they'll probably beat the Democrats, but we'd rather lose. Being in Colorado, I actually got to see us tank an entire party's relevancy. I mean, you know what the state of the GOP is in Colorado now. That used to be a swing state back when I was working for them. And they were willing to lose in order to make this happen. And so I'm just saying, what you are dealing with when you were dealing with the RNC or DNC, you are dealing with people that are extremely intelligent and extremely interested in consolidating and keeping their power. And they will do basically any immoral thing that you can make up. It's tough. It's biased. And this is why I think if you say, I don't want to play this game because the other guy gets to set the hoop that I then in turn have to jump through. And the fact that libertarians were able to jump through those hoops should actually go to as a real sign of our popularity. First of all, back with Johnson, well, that was actually the first time that plurality, or not even plurality, majority of Republicans and Democrats saw libertarians positively. It was over 50%. We've usually been there among Republicans. It was the first time we got there with Democrats as well. And just it was a really cool time. But like I said, they just make it more and more difficult. And that sucks. It's not fair. It's not their fault. That's not something I can blame the LPMC for specifically. There are times when people said, hey, if you lose focus on this, you're going to lose your ballot access, like in Minnesota, for example. And they just drop the ball. So, I mean, there are times that if you're going to participate in the process, ballot access needs to be your, if not your highest goal, one of your highest goals, because you know how difficult it's going to be.
Let me just say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Little Caesar Crazy Puffs are really good.
Oh, fluffy bread with garlic sauce on it.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I've seen the commercials on the NBA playoffs, and I'm like, you gotta get me some of those. And even though they've been sitting down there for 20 minutes, pretty good.
Advertising works.
Tasty. All right, so why do I think Trump speaking at the convention is a bad thing? Okay, here's my reasons. Like I said, you are hamstringing your candidate. If you're the Libertarian Party leadership, you're inviting the opposition to come in and you're basically giving them a paid advertisement because people are paying. Like, okay, you're sucking the oxygen out of the biggest fundraiser, the biggest volunteer organizational meeting, the biggest media hit, and you're taking all of the convention and turning it into a debate about this thing. And like Donald Trump loves it because his campaign is all about it, because it looks like the party is legitimizing him, and maybe he can persuade some people to not participate, not work as hard, and he again gets to suck all the oxygen out. You know, I saw an email from the Libertarian Party of Indiana chair Evan McMahon go out. The LPIN is calling for them to rescind, and he said, if I had invited U.S. Senator Mike Braun, the leading contender for the GOP nomination for governor, to speak at our state convention right before we select our gubernatorial candidate, you would all call for me to be removed as chair, and you would be right in doing so. This is especially a slap in the face to our own LP presidential candidate, who has to beg for supporters to donate to the essential LNC, essentially to purchase their spot on our debate stage. That's right. These guys have to buy their way onto the debate stage to participate. Donald Trump gets to speak for free, right? So you're when I was executive director, you know, I would have to call local people and say, hey, you're a chair of a county party or you're an officer of the state party. You can't put out on Facebook that you endorse a Republican candidate for office, because we have to show legitimacy as a third party, and you can't do that when your officers are endorsing the other party. Like, if you're that person who's on the other end of that line and you're now looking at Donald Trump coming and speaking, you just go, well, you're hypocritical. The national party's doing it, so I'm just gonna like quit. You know, and this idea that he's going to be challenged, I think that libertarian lady on X says he's going to say libertarian buzzwords and they will all be lies. Like, what about Donald Trump? What else do we need to know? Like, Donald Trump is 10 years old in our lives. Like, he has been around for 10 years. He has been president for 4. We know everything we need to know about him. We're not going to learn anything. He's never going to be in a position where he can be checked in any way. And nor is there anyone in the existing structure of the party that can check him, that can stand up in opposition to him. And as for donating $10 to the party, $10 per question, because Donald Trump is going to, answer your questions. No, he's not. He's just, at best, he's going to tell you what you want to hear. The other thing that I've heard is that maybe Angela negotiated that he's going to free Ross Ulbricht. That we're trading the ability for him to come speak to free Ross Ulbricht. Okay, I mean, why would you believe the guy? First and foremost, he was president for 4 years. He didn't free Assange. He didn't free Ross Ulbricht. And as for bringing media attention to the party, like, your job is the Libertarian Party. Your job is to grow that third party candidate to compete with the guy that you're inviting onto the stage. Like, nobody's going to cover your candidate, first of all, because the reporters are showing up for Trump's speech only. They're there for 2 hours, and you haven't selected your candidate. So that person's not getting media coverage. And the media coverage you are getting is that the Libertarian Party loves Donald Trump. I mean, Reinhold, thoughts in addition to kind of what I've said, or anything that you'd like to check?
Well, yeah, it's like, I think they just have this weird image of we're going to get all this news coverage saying, on the same on the same footing as Trump and our guys on the same footing. Well, we don't have a guy yet. We don't even have it in the agenda that we're going to be picking a presidential candidate this year yet. So that's got to be amended at the beginning of the convention. The agenda's got to be amended to include that. And I mean, it's all set up that if, somebody was really conspiratorial minded to say, hey, we're going to bring in Trump on the Saturday night, and then we're going to select our candidate on Sunday, and Trump's going to go give this amazing speech. We've got delegates who are on our side. Who's to say that Trump doesn't get put on the ballot to be voted on that next day after whipping up that speech? And to do that also, when you don't have, when you're telling people that, well, you have to give us a bunch of money even to be allowed to debate on whether or not you should be the candidate. And then you're giving away all this time and energy and everything to Trump. I mean, it's almost like it's lining up to do that. And that would be probably a great thing for Trump and a great thing for right-wing populists and MAGA people who don't really care about any of this stuff. Their principles as populists are only there as far as they help them get what they want. But it's just going to be terrible for 30 years of, or almost 50 years of libertarian movement. Just will be thrown out the window. And it's, I remember in 2016, we had the Liberty Hangout guys who ended up going full Trump side, and everybody kind of were like aghast that they were doing this and pushed them away. And it's like, they're loving this, I'm sure, because this is what they wanted the whole time. They just wanted right-wing populism to be the forefront of the movement. And they felt like they were being held back by anybody who wasn't, who was actually trying to do principled type of libertarian work. And then what do you end up with? Now we have, what's really the difference between Trump and some of those people. So I could see an argument being made that was the goal of what's going on right here it was originally to get Kennedy in there and then do the same thing with Kennedy, get him up on the stage, pump him up, and boom, we can put him in as our candidate and ride that coattail. Well, now you've got the opportunity to do Trump instead. I could see people trying that. I don't know if it'd work. I don't know if there's going to be enough people there to do it or not, because there's enough pushback already. But I could surely see it being a part of the conversation and being tried.
I highly encourage. So there's.
I see why you guys aren't hearing me. I'm not actually in the Zoom here. I was like, damn, Reinhold usually lets me talk, but
just override. I
know, right?
Yeah,
and the audio version. I had to eat the last puff. Okay. If there is a Republican Party that is in alignment with the Libertarian Party, then what's the point of the Libertarian Party? It kind of seems like that was the point to begin with. And this is just the validation of those of us who have thought that all along. Like, what's the point of the Libertarian Party if Donald Trump is on the ballot? Like, I never have understood like this desire to turn the LP towards the MAGA movement, because Donald Trump was always going to be the nominee and he is the nominee now. Like, there's no functional difference. There's no distinction between the two. So, like, if you want to talk about bold messaging and offering a choice that is principled, there's not anything resembling that coming out of the current Libertarian Party, which is a complete failure of what they promised. Cody.
Yeah, this is something that it's like somebody who represents himself in court. I'm not saying that you can't win. I'm saying that the likelihood is very, very, very low. And there is a reason that when the prosecution celebrates when you say you want to represent yourself on the defense. Donald Trump approached Angela and the LP about this meeting first. And
oh, really?
Okay. Yeah. So this is actually a letter I encourage everybody to read. It's from Jesse, the vice chair for the delegates, and has a nice write-up and email. Angela address, I think, state chairs as well, some delegates, I believe. But he put together a nice outline. It's actually, he is not like anti-LP MC. I don't know if he's with it himself, but it's just like an outline of basically what Angela mentioned. And he approached the LP first, was like, I want to do this. And after thinking about it, Angela thought it would be a good opportunity, extended invites to both Trump and Biden. That's why we saw her on Twitter being like, does anybody know how to get a hold of Biden? I'm trying to invite him if I can. This is the thing is when the GOP, and I'm telling you this as a former strategist, extends an invite, they are not doing it for your benefit. Right. They are well aware of what they are doing. The Republican Party has been very good at pulling wins out when less and less people are actually registering as Republicans and identifying that way. Their strategies are off the charts amazing. If I'm to say anything they do better than the Democrats, it's that. Like, they are, even as their numbers dwindle, they will still pull out victories where you don't think they can, because they will do whatever they have to tactically outmaneuver you. This is the equivalent of Bobby Knight inviting you to a chess match. And you just got to be like, okay, I don't know if I want to do this, because am I that good at chess? Now, I'm not saying he's unbeatable. You can do this. Theoretically, it is possible, but you have to cover all of your bases, and odds are good that these bases are covered. So a great example of this is Angela just last night talked with Austin Peterson, went on a show. I think this was just yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, but said, after bashing Trump, in fairness to Angela, she did a lot of bashing of Trump. And then Austin's like, well, can you say anything good about him? That's the bait. And she took it. She said something good about him. This is like being under investigation by a police officer, and they'll sit you down for 6 hours. In this case, they're sitting you down for an entire month until this convention, right? And all they're looking for is one little thing that they can use. And the more you talk, they're just waiting for that little thing that they can use. And then all of a sudden, bam, it's an endorsement. Go onto Twitter right now, search for 2 words, Trump Libertarian, and you will see how this is being taken. Now, I don't trust the media. Obviously, the media will make libertarians look bad whenever they can, especially mainstream media. Right wing, left wing, don't matter. They all hate us. So, like, obviously they're not playing fair, but you have to consider that, right? Like, that the media is out to get you when you do this. So you are already on notice. So when Angela says that's not fair, that quote's taken out of context. Yeah, that's the point. That's what they wanted you to do. They know about this. They know, they are waiting for this. They don't care that you're like, well, I'm being misrepresented here. No, it doesn't matter. This is the win that they want. And this is why they approached you for the opportunity. Think about the Rage Against the War Machine rally. They're waiting for you to have a bad quote, a couple of knuckleheads, a few Russia Today people, a few people waving the flags in the background, and it's over. Now, all of a sudden, in the eyes of the public, you represented a huge pro-Russian war rally, right? Like, that is what it is, unless you're in very minute libertarian circles. And of course, in minute libertarian circles, in their defense, yeah, that was, majority of it was anti-war. But that's because I'm in the circle and I know better. To the average voter, no, they don't know better. So Donald Trump sees these people who accidentally put together a pro-war rally. And of course, he's going to be like, I'll bet I can get him to accidentally support me as well. And of course, we as libertarians on the inside, we're going to be like, no, Angela said all these terrible things. Dave said he should be drawn and quartered at one point in his podcast in public, right? Like, these people, like, oh no, they really dislike this guy. But I'm begging you, look at this on Twitter, see how social media is taking. Get your finger on the pulse of anybody who has heard about this.
That's not what it's about, though. It's about how this club of people responds to it. It's what is cool for them. And the whole Mises takeover has always been a vanity project. It is and this is really how Mises has operated from as long as I've been a libertarian, since 2007, like, and longer, right? When you look back at history. What they're very good at is selecting their friends carefully and then cross-promoting their friends, and then building up each other's reputation, and then excluding anybody that they don't like, right? So the Mises Institute just had a recent article where now the term is micro-libertarians, or before that it was Beltway libertarians, or it's Cato libertarians, or it's whatever your pejorative is. You create a pejorative and you say anybody that's not with us is one of them. And people who have very low self-esteem go, oh my God, I don't want to be one of those people, right? I want to be with this crowd, right? And so the entire Mises Institute, Mises movement, Mises Caucus is about vanity. They don't care really what it looks like outside of their Twitterverse. They want to make sure that Tim Pool thinks it's cool. They want to make sure that it kind of plays well with the Jordan Peterson crowd. Like, that was always the point of the Mises Caucus, is to make the Libertarian Party the official party of that right-wing media ecosphere, because the Republican Party's not cool. So let's like bring them into the LP, which can be like the new cool hip thing. And so that's why they love when like some UFC fighter really like starts quoting Mises and, oh, we got Rob Schneider. See, it validates us, right? It is all about how it plays within their own inner circles. It isn't actually about winning. And so they've won, right? But they are winning online. They're not winning because they really don't know how to win an election, right? Like, this is what I said to Dave Smith when I was on his podcast. I actually don't know if I even got the chance to ask him this. I was like, what qualifies you to be an expert in presidential campaign politics or the libertarian campaign politics? Have you ever run a campaign? Right? I was watching Shaq on JJ Redick's podcast talking about, like, JJ Redick, when you talk about the big man, you don't get that right. I'm a big man, right? I know what it's like. I have the classification to talk about these things. So many of these guys have never actually run a campaign. They've never won anything. They're doing it to win online, to build their own brand, to further their own podcasting career. It is exactly what happens in Congress. Why do people run for Congress now? So they can become a congressman. They can go on C-SPAN. They can build their own network of people. They can build a fundraising mechanism. You know, if you have a fundraising mechanism, if you're Cliff Maloney, a disgraced member of society, basically in the libertarian movement, and you ran Young Americans for Liberty, and then you get canceled for very awful things, it doesn't really matter, because you have access to money to then go fund something like AMP, which is a media outlet, right? That is the goal. Have enough of social proof fundraising networks and social like reach that you become uncancelable. You become uncancelable by talking about cancel culture, right? So this is all about making them feel good and making them look good, because they really don't have much else going on in life. Like, what is Angela's job? What does Angela McArdle do for a living? How does she make money, right? She started some makeup brand, right? I don't know that went anywhere.
Anti-woke makeup brand, yeah.
Right? Like, her boyfriend gets an awful lot of money from the LNC, which looks really shady. If she loses to Mark Rutherford in the chairs race, are any of us going to be surprised if she goes to work for Robert Kennedy Jr. or Donald Trump? Like, what does this person have going on in their life? Right? So it's I don't know. It reminds me a lot of me 10 years ago, where it's like, I've got nothing else going on in life but being a libertarian and trying to make my libertarian brand grow and being significant in the libertarian world. And my self-worth is tied into like how many followers I have and how many people listen to my podcast. And it's like, I don't know. It's all very hollow and sad.
So, what I found is when you
paralegal, she's apparently a paralegal.
Yeah. The when you have a kind of a movement or a energy that you're doing where the focus isn't this one thing, it's just kind of to take control and be in charge, and then etc. You're ripe for being manipulated into doing things for other people because you're not looking out for it. It's not part of your concern. Your concern is just to kind of become popular. So there's lots of ways to do that. And when you start looking at the things where you talked about, where you overlay the money and the funds with, you know, Steve Bannon, or you notice that one of the top people working with Ron Paul, who's your hero, happens to be somebody who had a website called The Daily Putin and does things like that. You're right for these other groups, the Donald Trumps, maybe the Russians, that sort of thing, all to come in and just start putting their little pushing you in their direction, or pushing you to serve their needs.
Yeah, in female circles, they're called pick-me's. Right? Yeah. The pick-me mentality of, oh my God, they picked me, right? Like you can be bamboozled really easily. You can get manipulated really easily into taking the largest third party to a rally that is basically put on by Russian money. Like that makes the American government look bad, but don't say anything bad about the Russians, right? And then there's Russian flags flying behind you. Like you put yourself in a situation where you're the speaker of and you're the head of the largest third party, and there's Russian flags behind you. I'm not saying that you're paid by the Russians. I'm not saying you're a paid Russian stooge. I agree with you totally, Reinhold. You're a person who gets fooled very easily because you are trying to gain some significance because of your own lack of self-worth. That's what it really comes across. You know, Liz Coquard, who's had fire comments on the YouTube chat. I literally just said today that we went from the party of principle to the pick-me party. Angela and CHA, as Skalja says, are paralegals. I wouldn't hire them due to the quality of their work in the LP. Get that sweet insider info, Wall Street money, printer go burr, says third party. No thought went into this, Liz Coquard says. I'm so sorry for saying your last name at all. She also says, I think Angela's looking for a next job. All right, we got to do final thoughts. I got to go spend time with my family before I leave out of town for a week and a half. Sorry for being absent for the last couple weeks, but I do have content for you for the next 2 weeks here on the Chris Spangle Show. And yeah, I've got to go do things with my family, so try not to be too long, Hody and Reinhold. Go ahead. Final thoughts, Reinhold.
Final thoughts. This is just another step in the examples of what happens when you're not working on a set of principles you're trying to drive through division. You're not trying to drive through lifting everybody up and going through a proper kind of identified movement. This is just throwing things out there and trying to get popular, trying to get people looking at you and willing to do whatever it takes. And the willing to do whatever it takes to get power is how we get Trump. You know, it's how you get a lot of things like that. A lot of people in political power that we don't like or don't want there. We sit there and complain about, why do we have these people as options? Why do we have these horrible people running in government? This is why. This is exactly why, because we do this stuff. It's us. It's the people who are trying to be political and trying to get changes done, getting co-opted and pushed around by people who have money and are willing to do whatever they need to do it. And even if it's like Trump and Russians who are trying to influence the elections and stuff, they don't have to go and give people money to do this. They just have to, push them a certain way or give them an idea and give them to do this. And it's even easier for them at that point because nobody is leaving and looking out for anything like that. They're just wanting to do whatever. So this is why we are where we are.
Odie?
This is all a culture problem. The LPMC had a plank that said they would not engage in the culture wars, like white flag. They would talk about that 1 month after Angela took over his chair. I think it was a month, maybe 2, but said it's all about the culture war now. We're done with that. And I'm specifically being on the wrong side of the culture war, obviously. So now people will say, well, how are those two things connected? You can't afford to ignore it. If you see something, say something. Even if you see something, people want to have a principles argument. Most people are not principles driven. The people who are already libertarians. So the people who aren't are going to be like, yeah, that guy just seems like a jerk. And it's okay to say that, to just be like, a lot of people just use the Holy Spirit, right? And just say like, boy, I don't get a good feeling around these people. I don't really like this. That's okay. And you should say something. And it's okay to realize that politics is downstream from that culture. So when these people do ignore culture or have bad culture, when they say, oh, you're just being a drama queen or this is just infighting. No, you're not. If you care, you will say something. If you want the Libertarian Party to succeed, you will say something. Saying nothing enables the bad behavior to keep going on. It's a really, that's how we got here. When you dance with the devil, I guess I'll just leave this with my point. You are dancing with the devil. You're all aware he's the devil. There's a reason he extended the invitation to dance. If you accept, you better be prepared. make these people accountable for taking him on, make them accountable for turning this into positive PR if they're so sure they can do it. Because right now, I'm saying you can search this actively, win after win after win, and this has only been announced for like 48 hours, and the Republicans are stacking wins on this, and the Libertarian Party looks like a joke in the public outside of like a couple of hardcore right-wing populist libertarians. So if you want to turn it into a win, I believe you can, but it's the equivalent of beating Conor McGregor in the octagon. You're going to have to get shredded. You're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to eat right, think right, focus, and work every second of every day just to stand a chance of pulling off a win here. So if these people do anything, any slip ups, it's over and they lose. We are already losing. So hold these people accountable, make sure they're having the right conversations, make sure that when they see the tidal wave of these stories that are coming out and the Libertarian Party endorses Donald Trump and all that, make sure that these people who approved this are the ones sticking themselves on the front line saying, no, let me correct you on this. No, he is not anything like us. Make sure that they are doing all the work that we are now having to do as libertarians to explain why Donald Trump is not part of us. They got us into the mess. Make sure that they're helping you clean it up. Otherwise, they might as well have just endorsed Donald Trump anyway. Whether they did it through negligence or on purpose at that point is irrelevant.
Liz says they think this opportunity will give us a seat at the table, but in actuality, we are being made the meal, which I think sums up what Hody just said. And that's exactly right. It's just arrogance and pride and a lack of humility, and it's going to cost them dearly. It is whether it's not intentionally throwing up the white flag and surrendering, but that's what it is, right? You are basically saying, we don't believe in Michael Rechtenwald. We don't believe in our candidate. And if Chase Oliver's the candidate, we're not going to vote for him. We're going to go vote for the other guy anyways, because it's Rechtenwald versus Chase Oliver. And really, let's be honest, it's because he's liberal and it's because he's gay. And they don't want to support the candidate. I've asked every one of these people, well, you know, it's not that big of a deal if Trump's coming. I'm like, if Chase is the nominee, are you voting for Chase? Nah, probably not, right? So it's just admit that this is about liking Trump. You wanted to turn the party into a MAGA party. You know, you couldn't make it what you wanted it to be, which was the Ron Paul party. It was too hard for you. It was too difficult for you to do it. Your guy, Dave Smith, bailed on you. And that's really when it all fell apart. And for perfectly legitimate reasons. Why would anybody with a young family want to run for president? It's a completely thankless job to be the LP candidate. You should never destroy your life to run for a political office, let alone a libertarian office. I do not fault him for making that decision, but that's when it all really fell apart. And when that happened and you didn't have anybody else, this is just kind of you saying, look, we don't believe in this guy. And so just go vote for Donald Trump. It's probably not what you intended, but that's what the entire world and everybody else sees. Would be nice to see epic heckling of Trump. I mean, that's probably going to happen. Like, the guys like the Star Childs and the Radical Caucus with the dildos in 2018 at the front of the room, like every libertarian convention has like hecklers. This is going to be off the charts and something fun to watch. So I'll definitely be tuned into C-SPAN to see it. Rechtenwald voted for Trump. Rechtenwald once tweeted that he was weeping at a Trump speech. So we'll see if he's actually very excited about this because he thinks this is going to bring his supporters to the convention. So what does that tell you? Like when Rechtenwald, the guy who's the Mises selection, is excited because he thinks Trump coming to speak is bringing his support, it just tells you that they're not different. Like you want to say, oh, Bill Weld was no different than Hillary Clinton. Not true, right? Bill Weld is just the same as a Republican or Democrat. Okay, I can kind of buy by that, right? Like the point of Bill Weld was that he was going to bring unprecedented amounts of money and media attention using his network in Washington, D.C. to stump for Gary Johnson, which happened, which translated to 3.4%, which translated to 8%, 8 states getting ballot access, which translated to hundreds of new candidates being elected in those states. All right. Sounds like a fair trade for a vice presidential candidate. That's pragmatism. We don't like the guy, but there's upside, right? What's the upside here? What's the pragmatic trade-off of having Donald Trump come to your convention? You think it's going to help your candidate, but you can't think 3 steps ahead to realize this is robbing Michael Rechtenwald of media attention, robbing him of support, motivating the opposition to go and vote against him. I'm not going to Washington, D.C., but I'm sure going now to vote against these guys and make sure Mark Rutherford's chair and make sure Chase Oliver's the nominee. I was out, but now I'm in, which is something that I have heard from several people. Real risky move. So we'll see how it plays out. Hopefully you understand a little bit more about it. Thank you, Hody and Reinhold, for getting on literally with like minutes notice. I just got the note from my wife that she's ready to go. So this worked out perfectly. I thought we'll do this for 20 minutes. She'll get here with the food. I'll go eat. We'll leave at 6:30. This ended up being an hour and 20 minutes. But it was so good to talk to you, Reinhold. Thanks, Hody. Appreciate you guys being here.
Thanks, Emil.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you for joining us. If you like this, if you learned something, then please go share this with your friends. If you like Chuck here, who said, great podcast, guys. I learned a few things tonight. Please share this. That's the only way that podcasts grow, is if you share it with your friends and your social network. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And one note, I want to make a note here. Okay. So I'm looking at on StreamYard of the analytics, right? 2 people watching on my personal YouTube, 11 on the We Are Libertarians YouTube, 0 on my personal Facebook, 0 on the We Are Libertarians podcast Facebook page, which has 88,000 likes. I've got 14,000 followers. 0 people on those 2 platforms. That's weird. 2 on Twitch, 43 on my X, 11 on the We Are Libertarians X. Okay, so 70 people watching right now. I don't think 0 people on Facebook are watching, but are they not feeding it out to people so people don't see it, then they scan it and then decide to send it out to algorithms? Is it just a disconnection where there's a statistics reporting thing not happening? Our last conversation with Andy Horning got 243 views on my personal, so I know people are watching, but I don't know. Have you guys seen a single Facebook comment in the chat? I haven't seen anybody from Facebook, and we're in...
I just tried to look it up because I was going to share it on my Facebook. I while we were talking and I couldn't find it. So, like, I even tried looking it up, like, on our page.
Yeah. So really weird, because I know the Andy Horning conversation's up there. I haven't put it in the podcast feed yet, but it was on our Facebook and it got hundreds of views, but we had no views in the count and we had no comments then or tonight. So I think that's a really weird thing. I don't know if that's a StreamYard thing, a Facebook thing. Weird. But I wanted to mention it before we go, just in case anybody out there, I've noticed the same thing, or hey, there's an article about this. Let me know. All right, thanks. We'll see you again soon. We appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Love you. Bye-bye.